Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining this week's weekly wisdom webinar series. Wonderful to have you here. Thank you so much. An exciting topic and subject matter tonight, this evening where I am, of course, and that is the 14th tenet of the sovereign leadership model, and that is the authentic self. And essentially what is the authentic self model, because the sovereign leadership model feeds into the authentic self model, and the authentic self model feeds into the sovereign leadership model. And we're going to what we're doing this evening or this today is breaking down the entirety of that. Just one moment, please. Prop issues, technical issues, but it's all sorted now. Or thereabouts. There we go. Okay, thank you so much. So before we officially get started, let us be in reverence, and of course, let us be deeply thankful for the traditional landowners of this earth, their wisdom, their innate wisdom, their contribution, their meaningful contribution to yesteryear, today, and of course, future generations. May we be in honour of that wisdom. So, let us officially commence into the authentic self model. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a screen with you, and that really is going to be the entirety of today's webinar. Okay, and we're going to break down there's 14 tenets as well. So let me go back a little bit. There's 14 tenets of the sovereign leadership model. The authentic self, the posturing of the authentic self, or the tenet of the authentic self, is the 14th tenet or a tenet of the sovereign leadership model, and it also represents and symbolizes the authentic self model. And there are 14 tenets of the authentic self model. So there are 14 key tenets that make up what the authentic self is, and that is what we're going to speak to today. That is going to double up as an introduction for the following 14 weeks, of breaking down then the authentic self model. And today's really an introduction to that model and the tenets of that model, but also really grasping and understanding what the authentic self means, and then how it relates to and contributes to the sovereign leadership model. And that's a very empowering place to be, of course, when we have a full synopsis and understanding and a comprehensive grasp on the sovereign leadership model. And that rounds us off 15 weeks including, of course, the introduction to the sovereign leadership model. And that, of course, rounds us off of the last 15 weeks, 4 months or thereabouts. We have been fully engaged in the sovereign leadership model. A lot of detail, a lot of information, over 12 hours of information, over 15 hours of key information just on the sovereign leadership model and what it takes to be a sovereign leader. It's a very exciting space. So let me share a screen with you. Coming up. There we go. Wonderful. So this is the authentic self. Here we go. Sorry, this is the sovereign leadership model. We've gone through empathetic wisdom. We've gone through cosmic diplomacy. We've gone through infinite vision, intuition, artful stillness and silence, inclusive innovation, the connected mind, the 3 brain states, of course, the tenet of being of service, self-realization, the process of being self-realized, self-compassion, self-actualization, moving through a process of understanding to become self-actualized or be on that journey at least. Mastery. We have gone through mastery. We've gone through very recently, actually, immersive creativity, the resilient warrior posture. And now we find ourselves at authentic self, the authentic self and the authentic self model, which is, of course, very interesting. So what makes up the authentic self model? This is a powerful posture to maintain. It feeds directly into the sovereign leader. To be a sovereign leader, I'm of the belief that we must immerse ourselves in that authentic self, that authentic posturing. And when we immerse ourselves in that authentic posturing, we become a whole being. We become a almost enlightened being, that authentic self posture is so crucial to living a full life, to living a life that's engaged, to living a life that is connected, almost connected to self and connected to one's growth, but also connected to others, connected to reality, connected to our experiential understanding of the world. So what makes up the authentic self? So let's just start with vulnerability, trust, and openness. And we're going to go through all these. I'm just going to recap them here, and then we're going to go through them individually. And I'm going to just break them down. I'm going to break them down individually, provide a little bit of information on each, just a little bit of information, not too much, because we're going to go into, of course, great depth into each tenet, or as much depth as we can go into in about an hour or so, of course. Over the upcoming weeks, over the next 13 to 15 weeks, we're going to break down each tenet and really understand it from its core, what it means, what it symbolizes, what it represents, and how it can affect us as human beings. So vulnerability, trust, and openness is one tenet. The next tenet is humility and gratitude. You'll notice that there's some of the authentic self tenets I've coupled them. I've coupled varying postures, but very similar, complementary postures. Of course, each tenet feeds into itself and it complements itself, but some require a little bit more, they require a little bit more structure together, because they complement each other in such a way that when put together in a particular way, and when moving through life with a particular intention that encompasses both postures, such as, for example, humility and gratitude, it enhances the power of that practice or of that action or of that posture. Then we've got wholeness, what wholeness means. We have fear, failure, feedback. Of course, we're going to go into a little bit of these today as well, so we're going to understand them to some extent. We have creating balance, purpose-driven, the posture of purpose, being purpose-driven, reverence and self-respect, respect for self. Of course, that leads into respect for others, and we'll speak about that. Intention and attention. Courageous action, self-worth and self-value, sovereign leadership. So, of course, sovereign leadership, we won't spend too much time there because we've gone a great deal into what the sovereign leadership model is, of course, and over the last quite a few weeks, but we'll break that down again, of course. Infinite curiosity, universal connectedness, being self-aware. So self-awareness, a key tenet, of course, of the authentic self model. So with that said, let's jump into the authentic self. One moment, please. My apologies. One moment. Just having a technical issue here, and I'm sure we'll be fine. I'm sure it won't be a problem. Okay, the authentic self. Excellent. So this is what we're speaking to today. What makes the authentic self? Who and what is the authentic self? Again, very, very important to understand. When we understand the authentic self, we come from a very open place. We come from a very empowered place. And what does it mean to be authentic? What does it mean to fully connect? What does it mean to be authentic? It means to be integral in action. It means to move through life with congruency. It means that there's a match between our internal state, which is our three-brain state, our cognitive mind, our heart brain, and our enteric or gut brain. And that those feelings, those thoughts, those emotions, those inwardly derived behavioral states reflect accurately our actions, or our actions rather reflect accurately in truth or alignment with those actions within, with those states within. So external, extrinsic action replicates authentically, truthfully, congruently, with integrity, with almost a mirroring that internal state. In other words, we don't feel something yet behave in a very different way. There's no dissonance, cognitive dissonance, a psychological term, cognitive dissonance with respect to the way we feel, yet to the way we're externally behaving. There's a match there. It's a beautiful match, yeah? That's what we're speaking to. Courageous action. That is next. Courageous action. And we'll call this the first tenet of the authentic self model. What does it mean to take courageous action in life? It means that we step out of fear and we move into an ability to take action that's authentic, an ability to take action that is aligned with the greatest version of who we are. You see, in life, we often experience ebbs and flows, and in those troughs, the peaks and troughs, and in the troughs of life, we at times can become disabled from taking action with respect to what is in alignment with the greatest version of self, with what is most important to being alive, with what is most important to living fully, to living openly. And because we get stuck in our fear, and we'll speak to fear and failure and feedback later as one of the tenets, because we get stuck in our fear, we have an inability to act. We have an inability to step into our courage. We have an inability to recognize our power. We have an inability to not be able to recognize our brilliance in that moment and then take action in accordance with that brilliance. Now, there are a number of reasons why this can happen, and sometimes it happens because we're simply stuck in our stuff, we're stuck in fear, we're stuck in pain, we're busy, our minds are busy, we are bombarded with cultural clutter every day. Our lives become busy and busier and busier. We're to the point where we can't fully connect to the stillness and the silence that is us. And stillness and silence is a key tenet of the sovereign leadership model, of course. And that, my friends, is a sad place to be. And it's a sad place to be because it detracts us and distracts us from our authentic truth. So our ability to observe our circumstances as momentary, as temporary, as impermanent is part of that journey of the courageous warrior, or being able to take courageous action. Of course, this is also intimately linked to the resilient warrior tenet of the sovereign leadership model, which of course is important for understanding the fullness of who we are. Let us move on to the next tenet. Creating balance. Creating balance in life is an interesting proposition. We first must define what balance is. We first must understand what balance is from the three brain states, and particularly from the emotional state. So we have the three brain states that I mentioned earlier, the cognitive brain, the heart brain, the enteric brain or the gut brain. But then we must understand what creating balance means from an emotional perspective, a psychological perspective, a spiritual perspective, a physical perspective, so the four bodies of the human person. Also a cultural perspective, a relational perspective, a social perspective. Also understanding what creating balance means in the 9 areas of life. And they're the 4 bodies, so physical, spiritual, emotional, psychological. Then we have social, vocation, relationship, family. And what am I missing? Am I missing something? No, I believe that's it. I think I went through vocation, social. Sorry, mental block. Yes, 9 areas of life. Sorry, I think I got that. I count that right. So when we create balance in the 9 areas of life, we become more whole by nature. We become more engaged. We become more authentic. Okay, we become sovereign leaders. We engage and assume an authentic posture. But then we still need to define what balance is. So balance is experiencing life, not in extremes, but experiencing life as the Buddhists say, taking the middle path, where we're not fluctuating between huge ebbs and flows and peaks and troughs, tremendously disparate ebbs and flows, peaks and troughs, but rather we have an equilibrated understanding of life. We're able to view circumstances not in an emotionally charged way. And that's the key of having a balanced perspective on life and living a balanced existence, living life in a balanced manner where we're able to observe life in equanimity, in an equitable manner. And we're able to view life equilibrated. And that means that we have a deeper and broader understanding of what life actually is. And that, my friends, is so important to understanding self and leading to a naturally authentic expression of self through action, through behaviors, through interactions, through our relationships. And that is the power of creating balance. Remember, people, and I'll mention this a few times during the course of this particular webinar, is that we're going to break these down in great detail moving forward. We're going to break these down in great detail as the weeks progress. We'll spend a good hour and Q&A, of course, on each webinar. Yeah, webinars such as this go for a little bit longer. We don't generally do a lot of Q&A unless something comes up, pops up. I'll take it, of course, and I'll answer wherever I can. Otherwise, generally, what happens is we remain on track and really extract the most information as we can from each tenant to provide a very holistic understanding of the authentic self model in this case. This model is the authentic self model, of course. So now we move on to fear, failure, feedback. And what does that mean? It means the following. It means that in life, see, we've been taught in our Western paradigm, in our socio-cultural context, being the Western paradigm, being a capitalistic society, that a monetary-based society as well, a very individualistic society per se, as opposed to a collectivist society. We have been taught systemically, but also through familial conditioning. This is, of course, I'm speaking generally now. I'm talking from a general perspective. I'm talking collectively how our society functions and the collective values that we have. And this does not apply to everyone, of course. But when we look at systems, when we look at collective systems and collective structures, this is what generally shows itself through socioeconomic models, through sociocultural paradigms. So what we're looking at here, fear and failure, have been indoctrinated within our value set to not really be acceptable, to not really be something of value. But the reality is that fear and failure are feedback, or is feedback rather, into our lives, into the evolution of our own paths, into our own growth, and into our learning faculties. See, when we experience fear, and I'm not speaking, well, actually I am speaking to that physical fear, that life-threatening self-preservation fear, because that has a lot of learning that can come from that. Because we then, of course, develop these feedback loops in our brain, in our bodies, that allow us to recognize fear more promptly, that allow us to recognize danger more promptly through fearful mechanisms within or experiential states of fear that we partake in, that then advises us, hey, fight, flight, freeze. And those mechanisms, those feedback loops will advise us accordingly. Of course, that's very instinctive and it comes from the reptilian brain or the R-complex brain. So fear has a tremendous amount of value. But I'm not speaking to that fear particularly. I'm speaking to cultural fears. I'm speaking to immersing ourselves in success, immersing ourselves in pursuing our dreams, in living our purpose, immersing ourselves in expression, immersing ourselves in being the truest, most authentic version of self, immersing ourselves in activity that we know we may fail, that we may not succeed, success being based on setting a target or a goal or an objective, and then, of course, meeting that outcome within the parameters of the initially set objective. And failure, of course, is defined by the antithesis of that. But it's okay to fail. It's okay to reach for a goal or an objective or have a dream and then come a particular time, not be in that space to receive the fruits of that dream. It's okay, because when we accompany fears, those cultural fears, those relational fears, those fears around growth and self, with query, with powerful query, it changes the entire dynamic of how we view life. We view fear and failure as something of tremendous value, and we can learn from it. In fact, and I'll speak to this in great length when we speak to, and there's a reason why, and I'll explain it to you now, but when we speak to fear, failure, and feedback in our full webinar, I'll speak to how there are many globalized, innovative, multinational companies that fail forward, fail fast, and fail regularly. In fact, Google has a division where they allocate X amount of dollars, and it's in the hundreds of millions to billions of dollars, to select teams to continue experimenting. And they promote failure, but they promote learned failure. They promote failure with an essence of deeper understanding and contextual awareness. And what have we learned from that failure? How can we grow from that failure? How can we innovate harder? See, I've done a daily wisdom video, and I've done many videos on this. In fact, we speak a lot to innovation and technology in the workplace, in our socio-economic doctrine, in a socio-economic model of understanding the world. And that's fantastic. There's nothing wrong with that. But what about innovating ourselves, innovating our minds? So if you take what the large multinationals do, and that is they fail forward, they fail frequently, and they fail fast. What if we did that with our own selves? What if we experimented, we threw ourselves into life? But as we're doing so, we move with an intent, and we pay careful attention, which is one of the tenets following, to self and to those processes of fear and failure. What are we learning from that? Why am I experiencing this fear? What is it a reflection of? How have I failed? How can I improve? Really, what is failure? What successes have I gained from this perceived failure? And we'll go deep into the process of query. We'll go deep into how some of these multi-billion-dollar companies are really engaging in throwing themselves into what we consider failure, which is bad. Not at all. We're going to redefine what that looks like. We're going to reshape fear, failure. I'm going to demonstrate how fear and failure can be tremendous feedback for growth and tremendous feedback for developing alignment of authentic self, that alignment of authentic self and how we move through the world. That's an exciting tenet. It really is. It totally changes the way we look at life. Humility and gratitude. Next tenet. So this is one of those tenets that's very dear to my heart, because I've learned so much personally from engaging in postures of humility and, of course, understanding deeply what I am grateful for in life. And when we are grateful in life and we really, truly, deeply connect to what we are grateful for in life, I'll tell you what happens. We become very, very humble. We become meek. We give ourselves fully to life, and we give ourselves fully to our loved ones, and we become of service to the evolution of self and our own path and what we value most in life and where we wish to go and the types of experiences that we wish to have. And importantly, we become very, very grateful for our own breath, for our own selves, and we begin to see, hear, smell, touch, feel, observe the great wonder that is in all experience in life. And again, here we almost assume a stoic posture in part to life, which demonstrates to us that there is tremendous value in every experience. And from this place, we develop an attitude of gratitude, which places us in a space of humility. And in that humility, there is such deep openness that occurs, openness to information from the outside world, information where we can learn and grow and become more efficient, effective versions of self for ourselves for ourselves, rather. It's my bad England. For ourselves and, of course, for others. We can tremendously be of service to others. And that, my friends, is such an empowered posture to maintain. And importantly, we just feel better. We feel happy. Living in humility and gratitude places us in a position to feel and experience meaning and fulfillment in life. And meaning and fulfillment are the foundations for being happy. If that isn't enough to get you into an attitude of gratitude, which places you in a posture and a space of humility and humbleness and meekness, then I don't know what is. Because most would agree, unless we have some form of cognitive pathology, most would agree that happiness, the pursuit of happiness, is something that every human being craves. Just to be happy, just to be content. But there's so much more to happiness than just being content. And what is happiness? But we unpack all this in humility and gratitude, because this is really also about meaning and fulfillment. Humility and gratitude are deeply about meaning and fulfillment. So let us move on now to the next tenet. Infinitely curious, moving through life in an infinitely curious manner. This, my friends, is powerful. There's everything I do, as much as I can with respect to everything I do, I move with a very deep purpose. And purpose-driven is one of our tenets. And the reason being is because, or rather the reason why I mention that in this particular case is because we're speaking to two words here. I could have just put curiosity or curious, but being infinitely curious. Infinitely is the key word here. So I'm going to break down these two words, but I'm going to speak first to curiosity and being curious, and the power of being curious. When we are curious, we are intrigued with life. We are asking key questions of life, and the quality of the questions we ask ourselves leads to the quality of the life that we live. And it is in this space here, it is in this space of living this quality life that we are able to develop a deeper and broader understanding and varied perspectives of life. And it is in these varied perspectives, it is in this broadened and deepened understanding of life that we are able to immerse ourselves in more wisdom and greater knowledge of self and of our reality, and understand the world from a very different place where we are empowered to take action, where we are empowered with knowledge, where we are empowered with such an understanding that we can then take that action that's in alignment with the best version of self. But it begins with asking questions, begins with asking key questions of self, key questions of our reality, of our surroundings, of our environment, of our relationships. And it's that curiosity that allows us to ask those quality questions. But also, physiologically, what's happening is when we're asking quality questions of selves, our neural pattern, our neurons are firing very, very different. They're creating new patterns of behavior. Every time we ask a question of life, our brain moves to seek and find that answer. Now, whether or not it finds the answer, that's irrelevant, but just the seeking of it, well, it is relevant rather, but the seeking of it in and of itself is so powerful. And eventually when we move with very deliberate intent and an understanding and attention to self, to one's inward state, we are able to decipher the mysteries of life. And that infinite part, the infinitely curious, the reason why that's there is because knowledge and wisdom is infinite. There is no limit. We could never learn or know everything in this world, in this universe, in this cosmos, in this cosmic consciousness of wonderment. It's just not possible. But if we remain infinitely curious, we're constantly expanding. And as we constantly expand, we're constantly becoming fulfilled and developing deeper meaning in life. And it's that state of perpetual curiosity that drives us as human beings to innovate. Not to innovate only outwardly, but to innovate inwardly. And my friends, to me, that's such an empowering posture that it gets me quite excited. It allows me to be very connected to self. And I think, what quality questions can I ask myself here and now to allow me to truly, deeply connect to the most authentic, not only the most authentic version of self and who I am, but also the most profound aspects of reality. And I really love this depiction, this image here, where it's a cosmic person reading a book connecting to knowledge. So symbolically, the book is symbolic of knowledge and wisdom. The female is obviously the individual representative of ourselves, and the cosmic nature that encompasses her is that infinity that exists, that depth, that layering, that complexity that exists to our human being, to our nature. And that, my friends, is so powerful when moving through a space of being curious in life. And let's move to the next tenet. Be curious in life. It's a deeply empowered posture. When we ask questions, we learn more about what we want and what we don't want in life, what suits us, what doesn't suit us, what we align with, what we don't align with, what resonates with us and what we don't resonate with. Moving through life with intention and deep attention to self. This is an important tenet because this sets the foundation and the precedent for how we behave, but also the quality of the experiences that we are able to engage in life. And again, intention and attention are two separate practices, two separate postures, but coupled together, they're a very powerful tenet. So we speak about specific attention, and we speak, or detailed attention, and we speak about deliberate intention. And this tenet, a great deal of this, and of course we'll speak to all of these tenets in great detail moving forward, people. Each tenet will have at least an hour to itself, of course. But we're speaking to here the foundations of this tenet really deeply stem from the Bushido way, the path of the samurai warrior, and what that would look like in modernity, and taking very specific ethos and philosophy and understanding of that beautiful culture, that well-aligned, evolved culture, and understanding how that may be of impact here to us today. So in part, in the sovereign leadership model, I spoke to, one moment, I spoke to the resilient warrior as part of the sovereign leadership model, and there are aspects of that take from the Bushido way as well. So let's speak to deliberate intention, and let's briefly speak to detailed attention. Firstly, deliberate intention. When we move through life with an understanding, a scope of understanding of what is about to unfold to some degree, we are creating our lives. We are co-creating, we are manifesting what is most important to us. We are understanding the fullness of who we are. And we move through life with deliberate intention. And what that means is when we set our day, or we set our week, or we set our month, or we set the next minute or the next hour, we're moving with a deliberate intention to get the most out of that experience. And we get the most out of that experience by setting an intention or a statement of affirmation, an understanding of how we wish that experience to unfold, or that minute to unfold, or that hour to unfold, or that relationship to unfold, or whatever it may be. And the way we then understand ourselves in relation to that reality, or to that posturing, that complexity, is through attentive detail, or detailed attention to that experience. That in and of itself really sets us up for empowerment, for strength, for broader and deeper understanding of that experience. We can get the most from it. The authentic self, the sovereign leadership model, is all about getting the most from life. It's all about maximizing our potential as human beings. And these tenets are really thought-provoking postures that if we engage in them regularly, we become more enlightened, we become more at peace, we immerse ourselves in meaning, fulfillment, and happiness. We immerse ourselves in fulfilling who we are meant to be as human beings. And I love that notion that if we abide by, to some degree, to some level, that if we practice, if we expose our minds and our hearts and our bodies to certain practices and certain postures, the sky is truly the limit. Is it not? No, it's not. It is infinitely limited. I think that saying is outdated. The sky is the limit. I think it comes probably from a rudimentary understanding of reality, of our earth, of our place on this earth, of our place in this cosmos. And I think the new sky is the limit is that there is no limit. That infinitely we are deeply, deeply connected to all that is in an infinite capacity. So we move with a deliberate intention. We pay detailed attention to self. We pay detailed attention to who we are. We pay detailed attention to the fullness of our experiences. And we move with a deliberate intention, with a purpose, with prowess and power. Now, I want to be very clear on this webinar, and I speak to this a great deal. When I speak to power, I'm very, very specific and particular with how I refer to power. I'm not speaking to a coercive, controlling, restrictive, rigid, autocratic power. I'm speaking to a power that is authentic, a power that is real and well aligned, and that moves with a dual intention of selfish selflessness. And that intention is to be of service to one's path, to one's expansion of mind, to one's own journey, to the enveloping, developing aspects and power of one's own journey, whilst also being of service to others and being of tremendous value to others. And that, my friends, is such a powerful place to step into. Power. That's my definition of power. It's real, it's authentic. It's no bullshit. The purpose-driven person, the purpose-driven individual. Wow. This, my friends, is an empowering posture to maintain. When we move with purpose, we have clarity. We have clarity on who we are. We have clarity on who we wish to be. We have clarity on where we are going. And we can align our actions of present with our dreams or purpose or purposes or vision or visions for self of the future. So our future thoughts, wherever they may be, we're so deeply connected to that future understanding of self, that purpose, the reason or reasons for our existence, that we can very clearly align our actions of today with that purpose. And that, my friends, is being authentic. That is living in an authentic posture. That is maintaining an understanding of what it means to be deeply, deeply connected to self. And we move with purpose because we have clarity, because we've done the work to understand ourselves. So when I go through the 1 hour webinar per se on purpose driven, I'll more than likely provide you with some tools to be able to understand, well, how do we connect to our purpose? What does that look like? How do we then connect our purpose to our everyday actions? Well, we can create an alignment with understanding ourselves and where we want to go. And if we're living our life in a particular way now that resonates with who we are and who we wish to be, then fantastic. We don't need to change too much. We simply need to maintain course. But at times in life, we need to correct our course. And there needs to be a course direction, a new directive that takes place that assists us in getting back on track. So being constantly aware of our purpose and constantly reevaluating our purpose or purposes for life, and again, moving with that intention and careful attention. When we're carefully attentive to ourselves, we know, are we in alignment? Are we not? Are we on path? Are we not? purpose, though, is so powerful in developing a clarity for who we are and who we wish to be. Reverence and self-respect, and it's no mistake that I've chosen what I believe is a beautiful depiction of nature to be symbolic of reverence and self-respect. Respect for self, reverence for self, but of course, reverence and self-respect for others, our earth, our relationships, our four bodies, the 9 areas of life. It truly is an empowering posture to maintain. When we move through life as a tall, I believe this is a redwood, I'm not sure if it is, it may not be, but irrespective, to move through life as a tall, powerful tree. And what I mean by that is standing tall and strong in our own being, that we, again, all the tenets are connected, so there is an alignment in our actions of today with our future self, and we move through life with an integrity where we've created that harmonious balance within self, and that expression of how we behave outwardly is really a reflection of what we feel and how we think inwardly. And that is really part of being respectful, but respecting self to a point where we don't place ourselves in harm's way, where we don't place ourselves in a position that is detrimental to our own health or to the health of others. And that is living in deep reverence for ourselves and for our own journey, and of course for the journey of others as well. And that reverence and self-respect, when we combine that together, it's very, very powerful. Because again, when we move through life with wanting to have reverence for others, and there's a yearning to be respectful of others' space, and of course, that must come first from knowing that within ourselves. When we come from that place, when we stem from that space, we become deeply empowered, but we become very mindful of how we move through life. We become very mindful of how we act, how we behave, how we think, how we feel, how we speak to others, and importantly, how we speak to ourselves. A big part of this, and I'll speak to this in the webinar on reverence and self-respect, is all about self-talk. Is how do we speak to ourselves? How do we conduct ourselves within? How do we conduct ourselves within? Because this question, I'll ask again, how do you conduct yourself within? Because this question is so powerful. It's so powerful to the point that when we ask this question and we answer it, when we say to ourselves, would I speak to someone else like I speak to myself? Would I allow someone else to speak to my partner, or my loved one, or my brother, my sister, my mother, my father, like I speak to myself? And we know we're not on a path of respecting self, and we must transition our journey towards transforming our inner talk, our self-talk. And I'll speak to a great deal of negative and positive self-talk in this particular webinar, but it's an integral part. Respecting self is just huge, and it goes hand in hand with self-compassion and self-realization and self-actualization as well. Let's move to the next tenet. Being self-aware. What does this mean? This is huge. This is huge because when we are self-aware, we understand that we can move through life in a seamless, effortless manner. We don't need to encounter so much friction in life. We don't need to encounter so much pain, suffering, not that there's anything intrinsically wrong with that. But if we keep making the same choices over and over again, and we continue to feel the pain of those choices, and we choose not to transit and make any decisions outside of that continual path, that continual set of decisions that lead us to that pain, then we're not really self-aware. We're not aware of self. Now, self-awareness is really, when I speak to this in the webinar, I'm going to speak a great deal to the 9 areas of life here. And we're talking about acute and broad awareness in all areas. And really, you could spend hours on one area of life and talking about the awareness that we have in that area and what that means for us. And let's just use the physical as an example today. Do we have physical intelligence of self and or what I call, PQ, physical intelligence? Do we possess that understanding of body awareness through space and time? And I'm not referring to you being an elite gymnast or calisthenic professional, not at all. But do you have a basic, even rudimentary understanding of movement and your body? How aware are you of what your body can do and can't do? What signals does your brain receive neurologically about joint mobility and movement, and how you can move your body and what range you can take your body through, and what that actually means for self, for the brain function, for your quality of life, for what you can achieve, what you can be, who you can be, how you can be that. Are you maximizing your potential? And that's what self-awareness is about. It's about maximizing our potential in every area of life. That's why the 9 areas of life is a cornerstone to so many of the modeling, to so much of the modeling. So I was going to say to so many of the models, to so much of the modeling that I create, because the 9 areas of life lays a foundation and a reference point for really moving through life. So you can be self-aware, but self-aware in what? In context or in relation or in reference to what? So we speak to the 9 areas of life in this case, yeah? It's a very interesting concept. It's a powerful concept too. So self-awareness. Self-worth and self-value. This is intrinsically linked to self-respect and reverence for self. And here, this is a big one, people. I deal with many clients that they feel the pain, they feel the pinch of not valuing self. They feel the closure, the world closing within them, on them, and they feel the restriction and constriction in life, and they feel the fear. They feel the fear in life, and that becomes problematic for how they move through life. It affects our relationships in life. It affects the type of people that we are, and it affects us maximizing our potential when we have very little sense of self-worth and value of self, and that's very, very sad. So this webinar will be all about understanding self-worth and value, where that comes from, or where a diminished understanding and diminished connection to self with respect to worth and value comes from, where it possibly could come from, and what we can do, what tools we can implement to alleviate that. And it's something that when we get this right, it's also intrinsically linked to self-esteem, of course, and compassion for self. Self-compassion is part of the sovereign leadership model. But it is intrinsically connected to our power. Remember what I mentioned about power earlier. Okay? I'm not talking about a coercive, controlling, autocratic power. That's a weak power. That's a superficial power. I'm talking about an authentic power. And when we connect to that and we begin to value ourselves and back ourselves for who we are and what we're capable of, and we come from an inspired state of being as opposed to a demoralized state of being, our value to the world, but our value to the evolution of self is so expansive. It's fucking powerful. It really is. So self-worth and self-value is something that we'll speak to very deeply, and it really is, it lays the foundation for experiencing joy, bliss in life, for experiencing alignment and authenticity in life, and also learning to lead ourselves with prowess and stature in life. Again, not an egoic-based stature, but an authentic stature. It's aligned, of course. Sovereign leadership. Oop, my apologies, one moment. Sovereign leadership. This is, of course, one of the most powerful leadership frameworks for self that we can abide by. And let me just go through the 14 tenets of sovereign leadership, because all these tenets, these 14 tenets, you could effectively say that the sovereign leadership model has 27 tenets. and that the authentic self has 27 tenets as well. But I thought that was a bit not very digestible. So I thought I would break it up. And they feed into each other. So cosmic diplomacy, infinite vision and intuition, artful stillness and silence, inclusive innovation, innovating the mind, innovating the self, connected minds, the three brain states, being of service to self and to others, and the value in that. And the fact that we are biologically disposed to being of service. There is a biological inherent disposition in self, in every human being, to be of service, survival of service, survival mechanism. Self-realization, self-compassion, being kind to self, of course, self-actualization, realizing and acknowledging our potential, mastery of self, mastery of art, mastery of skills, mastery of relationships, mastery of life, and the benefit of mastery. And that there we speak to mastering the 9 areas of life as well and what they actually entail. Immersive creativity, the power of creativity, and what this means to us as sovereign leaders, how we can lead ourselves effectively and inspire others at the same time. The resilient warrior, a very stoic approach, a very value-driven approach, a posture that encompasses all facets of being, that recognizes the shadow self, that embraces the shadow self. Of course, the authentic self, empathetic wisdom, which I mentioned as well, of course, is compassion and empathy, but understanding, connecting to others, connecting to self, not only pain, but also glory and joy. And that, my friends, is the sovereign leadership model, which, of course, we've been through quite extensively the past 14 weeks or so. And again, a comprehensive model for moving through life and living in an inspired state continuously. Universal connectedness. Well, this is fantastic. This is deep. This is universal, and this is connective. Universal connectedness really speaks to our connectedness to all that is, to reality, to our cosmos, to every single human being, and how that includes, it's really a posture of inclusivity. How that posture, assuming that posture and that belief system of inclusiveness really changes the entire relational dynamic of all of Earth, but all of the cosmos, because we are all deeply interconnected. So this tenet moves into understanding the power of that, the importance of that, the necessity of knowing and understanding that we're universally connected as human beings and as living entities, as living beings, as material beings, but also as immaterial spirit matter as well. We go into a little bit of detail of what that looks like. It's a beautiful concept for having an inclusive attitude, because when we include in our sphere of reality, in our sphere of awareness, all that is, we are less likely to cause harm to that thing or that being. That's a very important concept for moving through life with purpose and integrity, and moving through life with universal consciousness as well. Vulnerability, trust, and openness. Wow. Powerful, really, really powerful tenet. We learn here what vulnerability means, that vulnerability is power. We learn then to trust ourselves and trust that power. And we learn to move through life in a very open state, because we realize that the truth shall set us free. Truth is everything, and we live that truth and we act in accordance with that truth. And we trust ourselves, but we also trust others, and we are open with ourselves, and we are also open with others, and we are vulnerable with ourselves whilst also being vulnerable with others. We are really living a life of fullness and wholeness, and it is that life that allows us to engage fully and beautifully and wonderfully in all of life. And we speak to how vulnerability and trust and openness interlink and connect to create a wonderful posture of endearment, or really assuming an endearing understanding of self and life. Wholeness, a beautiful concept. Wholeness speaks to the shadow self a great deal, as does the resilient warrior, but not the resilient warrior speaks to a multitude of other postures within that framework. Wholeness is really embracing all that we are and learning how to do that. Wholeness is embracing the entirety of our existence and our reality, a faculty of being that allows us to deeply connect to the wonder that we are, to recognize and observe and also absorb, but also be in reverence for the bad stuff, the good stuff, everything that we experience. And that posture of wholeness, that state of wholeness, or rather that posture of wholeness leads to a state of openness. And in that state of openness, we are susceptible and open to so much information, which is tremendously empowering for us. We come back to the authentic self model, people. So wholeness was the last tenet here. We come back to the authentic self model, and this becomes exciting. So from this point here, we'll move into next week, the first tenet of authentic self. And I haven't decided what that will be. It may be we'll go by the slides here, we'll go by the images here, or we may mix things up a little bit. Depends how I'm inspired during the week. But it's going to be fun. It's going to be great. We're going to speak openly to all of this. And I'll tell you what, we're going to go deep into the authentic self model, and we're going to get creative. We're going to get infinitely curious, and we're going to get very connected and very authentic. And you're going to understand how this model, this authentic self model, lends itself to you living an empowered state of being. I want to thank you so much for watching. I'm deeply grateful. If you have any questions, please email me, steph@stephsophanos.com. Contact me via social media, Facebook Steph Sophanos, YouTube Steph Sophanos, Instagram Steph Sophanos. Jump on, visit my website if you are interested in some of the direct programs as well, the one-on-one programs or the other online programs, www.stephsophanos.com/programs. And one, as always, is glad to be of service. Many blessings on your journey. Thank you so much. Have a beautiful, beautiful day, afternoon, wherever you are. And I wish you the best.